Hello, and welcome to the Unsleeping Historian. Tonight, we invite you to close your eyes, to settle in, and to let the noise of the modern world fade into the background. There is nothing for you to do right now, nothing to solve, nothing to prepare for. There is only the story of a time long past, a world that rose from the waters of a great lake, shimmering under a sun that was, to its people, a living god. We are traveling back 500 years, to the heart of Mesoamerica, to the Valley of Mexico. Here, on an island in the center of Lake Texcoco, stood the magnificent city of Tenochtitlan, the capital of the mighty Aztec Empire. It was a world of stark contrasts, of floating gardens and towering pyramids, of intricate poetry and brutal warfare, of immense wealth and profound spiritual duty. Tonight, we will walk the paths of this city and its people. We will begin by following the arduous journey of its most elite defenders, the Eagle Warriors, and feel the immense weight of their sacred, violent purpose. From the battlefield, we will enter the halls of power to witness the fateful, world-altering meeting between the Aztec Emperor, Moctezuma II, and the Spanish conquistador. We will then explore the breathtaking engineering of their island city, a Venice of the New World, built against all odds. And finally, we will contrast the warrior's life with the unimaginable opulence and ritual inside Moctezuma's own palace. There is no need to follow every word. Let the details wash over you. Let your mind drift on the currents of history. This is a story of a world that was, and your only task is to listen, to relax, and to find your rest. Imagine yourself as a child in Tenochtitlan. The air in the morning is cool and carries the scent of damp earth from the floating gardens, and the faint, ever-present smell of wood smoke and cooking fires. Your world is one of order, of structure, dictated by the gods and the calendar. And for you, a boy born into a commoner family, the path of your life is largely set. But there is one way to ascend, one path to glory, that can elevate you and your family to the highest echelons of society. It is the path of the warrior. This journey does not begin with a choice made in adulthood. It begins almost from birth. As a young boy, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, you are already learning the rhythms of duty. Your father teaches you the basics of your family's trade, perhaps farming, or fishing, or pottery. But he also teaches you to carry loads, to be resilient, to endure hardship without complaint. This is the foundation. The true training, however, takes place at the Telpoch. Picture this school. It is not a place of quiet contemplation. It is a place of rigorous, relentless conditioning. Here, alongside other boys from your neighborhood, your days are filled with punishing physical labor. You might spend hours carrying heavy stones to a temple construction site, or digging canals to irrigate the city's gardens. The purpose is twofold: to serve the community, but more importantly, to build a body that can withstand the rigors of a campaign. Sleep is often on a hard floor, food is simple and scarce, and discipline is absolute. You learn that the needs of the collective, the Kalpuli, far outweigh your own. As you grow older, into your early teens, the training sharpens its focus. You are handed your first weapon, not the deadly obsidian-bladed Makui Hill. Not yet, but a simple club and a wicker shield. Under the watchful eyes of veteran warriors, you learn the essential movements of combat, the footwork, the parries, the feints. It is a deadly dance, and you practice it for hours under the hot sun, your muscles aching, your breath coming in ragged gasps. You learn that fatigue is an enemy as dangerous as any warrior from a rival city. But the Aztec way of war is not simply about strength and skill. It is deeply intertwined with religious conviction. Your instructors, battle-scarred men who have seen the horrors and glories of war, teach you the most important rule of Aztec combat. You are not fighting to kill. You are fighting to capture. This single, defining principle shapes everything you do. To kill an enemy on the battlefield is a clumsy, almost wasteful act. The gods, particularly Huitzilopochtli, the sun god and god of war, require nourishment. They thirst for the Chalquihuitl, the sacred water-human blood, a living captive, one who can be marched back to Tenochtitlan and presented at the temple, is the ultimate prize. His sacrifice will ensure that the sun rises again tomorrow, that the crops will grow, that the universe will remain in balance. Imagine the psychological pressure of this duty. In the frenzy of combat, with your heart pounding in your chest and the screams of men all around you, your goal is not to deliver a final, killing blow. It is to subdue, to wound, to disarm your opponent, to grapple with him, bind him, and drag him from the fray. It requires a different kind of courage, a different level of control. A single captive elevates your status, but the path to becoming an elite warrior, a member of the prestigious Eagle or Jaguar orders, requires more. It requires many captives, taken over many campaigns. Before your first battle, you undergo rituals of purity. There are periods of fasting, where the gnawing hunger is a constant reminder of your devotion. There are nights of vigil, spent in quiet contemplation, offering prayers and burning incense. You are marked with the symbols of your city and your god. You are no longer just a boy. You are an instrument of the divine will. And then comes the day you march to war. It might be a formal campaign against a rebellious province, or it might be something more peculiar to the Aztec world. Acacia. Picture two armies, arrayed in all their finery, brilliant feathered banners, gleaming shields, fearsome helmets carved in the likeness of coyotes, jaguars, and eagles. They meet on a prearranged field. This is not a war of conquest, but a sacred, ritualized conflict with a neighboring power. Like Clis, the purpose is singular: to provide a fresh supply of captives for sacrifice on both sides. It is a horrifying, yet strangely formal, arrangement. A constant struggle, agreed upon by both powers, to feed the gods. In the heart of this battle, you are tested. The noise is overwhelming. The blast of conch shell trumpets, the deep, rhythmic pounding of drums, the war cries of thousands of men. The air is thick with dust and the metallic scent of fear. You see men fall, their lives brutally cut short. You see the desperate struggle of a warrior trying to drag a captive from the chaos. And you know that your own fate hangs on a razor's edge. To be captured is perhaps the most dreaded outcome. You know exactly what awaits you atop the enemy's pyramid. It is a fate you hope to mete out, but never to receive. Should you succeed, should you manage to capture your first enemy, you return a hero. You are allowed to tie your hair in a new style, a public declaration of your achievement. But you are not yet a warrior. You are a Tlamini. To truly ascend, you must do it again and again. The path to becoming an eagle warrior is a long one, paved with the bodies of those you have defeated. After taking 4 captives, you earn the right to enter this exalted brotherhood. The Eagles, or Cuidli, and the Jaguars, or Ocelotl, are the 2 most respected military orders. They are the shock troops of the Aztec army, the tip of the spear. As an eagle, you are granted privileges denied to commoners. You may wear magnificent uniforms made from the feathers of eagles, symbols of the sun and the heavens. You may eat at the emperor's palace, receive land, and wear cotton clothing and sandals in the city. You are revered. People step aside as you walk through the market. Yet, this reverence comes with a heavy, unspoken burden. You live in a state of perpetual readiness for violence. Your mind is forever occupied with the strategies of war and the rituals of sacrifice. You have seen things that would shatter the psyche of a modern person. You have participated in ceremonies that are, to our eyes, the pinnacle of brutality. The very act that gives your life meaning and purpose. The capture of men for the sacrificial stone is an act of profound violence. You are a living paradox, a keeper of the peace through the practice of war, a bringer of life to the sun through the act of dealing death. The rhythm of your life is one of discipline, piety, and a constant, intimate struggle with mortality. And in the quiet moments, in the dead of night, you perhaps wonder how many more campaigns you will survive, and when the sun might demand a debt that you yourself must pay. The eagle warrior we have just imagined, a pillar of Aztec society, served an emperor who was more than a man. He was the Tlatoani, the he who speaks, the link between the mortal world and the divine. In the early years of the 16th century, this position was held by a man named Moctezuma Xocoyotzin. He was a ruler of immense power, a former warrior and high priest who presided over a vast empire. From his palace in Tenochtitlan, he commanded tribute from hundreds of conquered cities. His word was law, his person sacred. But a series of unsettling omens had begun to disturb the rhythm of his reign. A pillar of fire in the night sky, a temple spontaneously consumed by flames, the wailing of a spectral woman in the streets, and a strange bird with a mirror in its head, brought to the emperor, that was said to show an army of marching men. To the Aztec mind, a mind that saw meaning and divine will in all things, these were not random events. They were portents, whispers of a great and terrible change to come. Then, in the year 1519, news arrived from the coast. Reports from messengers, swift runners who could cross the empire in days, spoke of mountains floating on the sea. They spoke of men with skin as pale as limestone, with hair on their faces like corn silk, who commanded beasts like giant deer and wielded sticks that roared with thunder and smoke. Imagine Moctezuma, in his palace, receiving these reports. He was a deeply pious man, steeped in the mythology of his people. One of the most important Aztec legends was the story of the feathered serpent god, who had departed across the eastern sea long ago, promising to one day return. The year of the stranger's arrival, CE Acata, or one read in the Aztec calendar, was the very year prophesied for Quetzalcoatl's return. Was this him? Was this a god? Or a delegation of gods, come to reclaim his throne? Or was it something else entirely? The leader of these strangers was a man of formidable ambition and cunning, driven not by prophecy, but by a thirst for gold, glory, and the expansion of the Spanish crown. He led a small force, just a few hundred men, but they possessed a technology and a mindset utterly alien to the Mesoamerican world. Steel armor and swords, crossbows, firearms, and, perhaps most terrifyingly, horses. Moctezuma's response was one of caution and reverence. He dispatched emissaries bearing magnificent gifts, discs of solid gold and silver carved like the sun and moon, intricate featherwork, and precious jewels. In the Aztec worldview, such gifts were a display of power and wealth, an offering fit for a god. But to the Spanish, it was not a sign of reverence. It was confirmation of the immense riches they had hoped to find. It was an invitation, not to be respected, but to be accepted. The gifts, meant to appease, only inflamed their desire. Began his slow, deliberate march inland. He proved to be a masterful politician, exploiting the deep resentments many conquered city-states held for their Aztec overlords. He forged a crucial alliance with the Tlaxcalans, fierce enemies of the Aztecs, who saw in the Spanish a chance to throw off the yoke of Tenochtitlan. His small band of Spaniards was soon bolstered by thousands of indigenous warriors, who knew the terrain and burned with a desire for revenge against the empire. As they drew closer, Moctezuma was caught in a state of profound indecision. His advisors were likely divided. Some, perhaps the more aggressive military leaders, would have counseled a swift, overwhelming attack. Others, perhaps the priests, would have urged caution, fearing divine retribution if these visitors truly were who they seemed to be. Moctezuma chose a path of diplomacy and reluctant hospitality. He invited the strangers into his city. Picture the scene on November 8, 1519, and his men, accompanied by their Tlaxcalan allies, march across one of the great causeways leading into Tenochtitlan. They see a city larger and more orderly than any in Europe. They see the floating gardens, the gleaming white temples, the canoes flitting across the water. It seems like a dream. On that causeway, the two worlds met. Moctezuma carried on a magnificent litter, adorned with quetzal feathers and gold. He was a figure of immense dignity and power. Through translators, a shipwrecked Spaniard and a native woman named later known as Lama Lince, they exchanged greetings. Moctezuma welcomed, perhaps still believing him to be the returning Quetzalcoatl, saying, "You have come to your city. You have come to sit on your throne." In a gesture of European familiarity, moved to embrace the emperor, but was immediately stopped by the Aztec lords. No one was permitted to touch the sacred person of the Tlachtolteca. It was the first of countless cultural misunderstandings. The Spanish were housed in the lavish palace of Moctezuma's father. They were treated as honored guests, given food, and shown the wonders of the city. But they were also in a golden cage. They were a few hundred men on an island, surrounded by tens of thousands of Aztec warriors. The awe was mixed with a palpable sense of dread. Knew his position was precarious, and so, he made an audacious move, using a skirmish on the coast as a pretext, and his captains went amok. Through a mixture of threats and persuasion, placed the emperor under arrest. They forced him to move from his own palace into the compound where the Spanish were staying. It was a bloodless coup of breathtaking boldness. Moctezuma, for reasons still debated by historians, perhaps fear, perhaps a genuine belief in the divine nature of the Spanish, perhaps a strategic decision to avoid a massacre in his city. For months, an uneasy peace held. Moctezuma continued to rule his empire, but he was a prisoner. His orders now filtered through. The Spanish began to push their luck, demanding vast amounts of gold and insisting that Christian symbols be placed in the Aztec temple. The tension in the city grew. The Aztec nobility and priesthood grew restless, their humiliation turning to anger. The breaking point came when had to leave the city to deal with a rival Spanish force on the coast. He left his hot-headed lieutenant, Pedro de Alvarado, in command. During the great festival of Toxcatl, a vibrant and sacred celebration, Alvarado, fearing an uprising, made a fatal decision. He ordered his men to attack the unarmed, celebrating Aztec nobles and priests in the main temple courtyard. It was a massacre. The joyous ceremony turned into a scene of terror and confusion. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of the Aztec elite were slaughtered. Any hope of a peaceful resolution was destroyed in that moment. The city erupted in fury. When Cortés returned, he found Tenochtitlan in open revolt. The captive Moctezuma was sent out onto a rooftop to try and calm his people, but his authority was gone. He was met with a shower of stones and arrows. Wounded, he was carried back inside, and he would die shortly after, whether from his injury or at the hands of the Spanish, who no longer had a use for him, remains unclear. With the emperor dead and the city baying for their blood, the Spanish position became untenable. On a dark, rainy night in June of 1520, known to the Spanish as La Noche Triste, the sad night, they attempted to flee, but they were discovered. The causeways, their only escape route, became treacherous bridges of sorrow. Aztec warriors attacked from all sides, from canoes on the water and from the rooftops. The Spanish, weighed down by the gold they had tried to carry, were cut down, or they fell from the causeway and drowned. It was a devastating defeat for the conquistador, and a fraction of his force managed to escape. But the encounter that began with such strange and formal reverence had now irrevocably tipped into open, brutal warfare. He had seen the heart of the empire, and now, having been cast out, he would marshal his allies and return not as a guest, but as a conqueror, determined to destroy the very city that had so mesmerized him. The fate of the Aztec Empire and the world of the Eagle Warrior now hung in the balance. The battle for Tenochtitlan, the conflict we just witnessed, was a fight not just for power, but for a place as singular, almost impossible, beauty and ingenuity. To truly understand the world of the Aztec, we must step back from the clash of armies and float above the city itself to appreciate the marvel that they built. Let us leave the timeline of events for a moment and simply explore the space they called home. The story of Tenochtitlan begins with a prophecy. The wandering Mexican people were told they would find their home where they saw an eagle perched on a cactus, devouring a serpent. The legend states that they found this sign on a small, swampy island in the middle of Lake Tech. It was an unlikely place for a capital. The ground was marshy and unstable. The water was brackish and undrinkable, and they were surrounded by larger, more powerful cities. Yet, from this unpromising mudflat, they engineered a metropolis that would become one of the largest and most magnificent cities in the world. Imagine yourself in a canoe, gliding through the waterways on the outskirts of the city. There are no roads here, only canals. The water is calm, reflecting the deep blue of the sky. All around you is a vast, green tapestry of rectangular fields, bursting with vibrant crops: maize, beans, squash, tomatoes, and brilliant flowers. These are the famous often called floating gardens. There was something far more permanent and ingenious. To create one, the Aztec builders would weave a massive rectangular frame from reeds and stakes, driving it firmly into the shallow lake. Within this frame, they would layer mud dredged from the bottom of the canal and decaying vegetation, building it up until it formed a solid, incredibly fertile island of reclaimed land. The roots of willow trees, planted along the edges, would eventually anchor the new landmass firmly to the ground. This system was a miracle of sustainable agriculture. The chinampas were constantly irrigated and fertilized by the surrounding water and canal mud. They allowed for multiple harvests a year, providing a constant supply of food that fueled the city's enormous population. This network of canals and gardens was the lifeblood of the city's markets, a sprawling, green labyrinth that fed an empire. The air here would have been thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers, the silence broken only by the gentle splash of a paddle in the water or the distant call of a bird. As your canoe takes you closer to the city's center, you would eventually reach one of the three great causeways. These were massive feats of engineering, wide earthen and stone dikes that stretched 4 miles, connecting the island city to the mainland. They were the city's arteries, bustling with merchants carrying goods, messengers on foot, and nobles in litters. But they were also a key part of its defense. Sections of the causeways were built as removable wooden bridges. In times of peace, they allowed canoe traffic to pass underneath. In times of war, as the Spanish discovered on the Noche Triste, they could be lifted, turning the city into an almost impregnable island fortress. Yet, for all the water surrounding the city, one of its greatest challenges was getting fresh water to drink. The water of Lake Texcoco was salty. To solve this, The Aztecs engineered monumental aqueducts. The most famous was the one that ran from the springs on Chapultepec Hill on the mainland. It was a remarkable structure, a raised channel made of compacted earth and wood, lined with stone. It was cleverly designed with two parallel tubes. This meant that when one channel needed to be cleaned or repaired, the other could continue to supply the city with an uninterrupted flow of fresh, clean water. This water fed public fountains and reservoirs, a daily miracle of engineering that kept the city alive and clean. At the very heart of this intricate system, the symbolic and literal center of the Aztec universe, lay the sacred precinct. This was a vast, walled square, home to dozens of temples, palaces, and schools. And dominating it all was the Templo Mayor, the Great Temple. Picture a colossal stepped pyramid, rising nearly 150 feet into the air. At its summit were not one, but two temples. The one on the right, painted a stark white and brilliant red, was dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and war, the patron of the Mexica people. This is where the Eagle Warrior's sacred duty reached its conclusion, the place for the ultimate offering that was thought to keep the sun in the sky. The temple on the left, painted a vibrant blue and white, was dedicated to Tlaloc, the god of rain and water. One temple represented the fire of war and the sun of the dry season. The other, the life-giving water of the wet season. The entire pyramid was a monument to this essential duality, the constant struggle and balance of fire and water that governed all life. For centuries, this city lay buried. After the conquest, the Spanish systematically dismantled the temples and palaces, using their stones to build their own colonial capital directly on top of the ruins. Tenochtitlan became a memory, a lost city hidden beneath the streets of modern-day Mexico City. But in 1978, electrical workers digging in the city's center struck a massive, carved stone disc depicting the dismembered moon goddess. This discovery led to the excavation of the Templo Mayor itself. Archaeologists, peeling back the layers of time, uncovered the base of the Great Pyramid and thousands of artifacts, ritual offerings of jade, coral, skulls, and gold. They revealed the foundations of a world that had been thought to be lost forever, allowing us to reconstruct, in our minds, the splendor of this city on the lake. It is a quiet reminder that the past is never truly gone. It sleeps just beneath our feet, waiting to be just a short walk from the towering form of the Templo Mayor, the center of divine communion, stood another complex of buildings that formed the center of all political and earthly power. The palace of Moctezuma II. If the life of the Eagle Warrior was one of hardship, discipline, and sacred violence, the life of the emperor he served was a world away, cushioned by a level of opulence and ritual that is difficult to comprehend. To understand the contrasts of the Aztec world, we must now step inside these walls. Forget the hard-packed earth of the training grounds. Imagine floors covered with cool, polished stone and soft reed mats. The air here is not filled with the sweat of exertion, but with the subtle, pervasive scent of burning copal incense and the perfume of fresh flowers, replaced daily by an army of servants. The palace was not a single building, but a city within a city. Chroniclers spoke of hundreds of rooms, organized around numerous courtyards and plazas, each bathed in the bright Mexican sun. There were chambers for receiving nobles, halls for administering the empire's vast tribute system, and quarters for the hundreds of artisans, guards, and attendants who made the palace function. A world away from the warriors' meager rations of maize cakes. The emperor's daily meal was an extraordinary ceremony. Moctezuma would sit on a low, richly decorated stool, hidden from the view of his courtiers by a gilded screen. Before him, an almost unbelievable procession of food would be presented. Servants would bring over 300 different dishes, kept warm on ceramic braziers. There was turkey, venison, wild boar, every variety of fish from the lake and the sea, and delicate preparations of vegetables and fruits from every corner of the empire. He would be attended by 4 of his most senior lords, who would serve him in utter silence. He would point to the dishes he desired, and they would be placed before him on fine Cholula pottery. He drank his cacahuatl, rich, unsweetened chocolate drink, frothed and served in a cup of pure gold, and wiped his hands and mouth on fine cotton napkins. While he ate, there was no loud conversation, no music. There might be quiet entertainment, perhaps jesters or acrobats performing at a distance. The ceremony was a daily affirmation of his unique semi-divine status. What he did not eat was then distributed among his guard and the members of his court. His private quarters were even more lavish. He slept not on a simple reed mat, but in a chamber hung with fine textiles. His bed made of soft fabrics woven from cotton and rabbit fur, His clothing was never worn more than once. Each day he would don a new set of magnificent robes, which would then be given away to deserving attendants. His palace was not just a home, but a living museum of his empire's might. He maintained vast botanical gardens, filled not only with beautiful flowers but with every useful medicinal herb known to his people. Beyond the gardens was a menagerie, a zoo that astounded the Spanish. It contained jaguars, pumas, and wolves in spacious enclosures. And most famously, there was a totocale, a house of birds, an enormous aviary filled with thousands of birds of every color and description, from the brilliant scarlet macaw to the treasured quetzal, whose long iridescent tail feathers were worth more than gold. Yet, for all this unimaginable wealth and power, the emperor's life was one of profound isolation. He was the Tlatoani, the he who speaks, but he lived in a world of prescribed silence and reverence. When he appeared in public, he was carried on a litter, and his subjects were forbidden from looking directly at his face. They would avert their gaze and bow their heads. To touch him was a sacrilege. His every action, from the moment he woke to the moment he slept, was governed by ancient and unbreakable ritual. He was the most powerful man in his world, but he was also its most solitary prisoner, encased in a beautiful, gilded cage of divinity and duty. This was the world that stood in stark contrast to the life of the common man and the warrior. The warrior's path to glory was paved with scars, sacrifice, and the constant threat of death. The emperor's was one of inherited sanctity and untouchable splendor. Both served the same gods, the same empire, but they inhabited different realities. A perfect illustration of the rigid and deeply stratified world of the Aztec. And so, our journey through the world of the Aztec comes to a close. We have walked the demanding path of the eagle warrior, feeling the weight of his sacred duty. We have stood on the causeway and witnessed the fateful meeting of two worlds, a meeting that would unravel an empire. We have drifted through the canals of Tenochtitlan, marveling at the city that rose from a lake, and we have glimpsed the silent, lonely splendor of the emperor in his palace. The stories of these people of the warrior, the emperor, the engineer, the conquistador are now but echoes, carried on the wind of time. Their city, a marvel of ingenuity, sleeps beneath a modern metropolis. Their gods, who once demanded so much, are silent. Their struggles, which felt to them like the turning of the very universe, have settled into the quiet pages of history. All the intensity, the piety, the violence, and the wonder of their world has passed. What remains is the peace of the present moment, the comfort of your own bed, the security of knowing that the sun will rise tomorrow without any help from us. There are no battles to be fought, no omens to decipher, no emperors to appease. There is only the gentle rhythm of your own breathing. Let the details of the past dissolve. Let the names and the dates fade away. Allow the stories to become a soft, distant landscape in your mind. All that is left to do is to rest, to let go, and to drift into a deep and peaceful sleep.